glands and heart. I'm going to go through two subdivisions, the parasympathetic nervous system. Both of these subsections have tremendous amount of impact upon the dynamic balance of what they refer to as homeostasis. Homeostasis is a word I don't really like. I think you're homeostatic when you're dead. I think homeokinesis is a word that I kind of invented it. I think I'm the only person I know that ever used it. But I think that's a better understanding of it. The enteric nervous system lies within the walls of the gut, includes neurons that innervate the pancreas, the liver, the gallbladder. Thus, it's kind of an entity by itself. However, the enteric nervous system is a pivotal part of the autonomic because it controls gastrointestinal motility, secretions, various enzymes, and blood flow within the gut. Plays much less of a part in cardiovascular activity as does the sympathetic and parasympathetic division, but nonetheless it exists. The central autonomic nervous system basically arises from outflow from the hypothalamus, the brainstem, the spinal cord. You can read this as well as I can. They stimulate gyrus in the hypothalamus, certainly. And to modulate the function of autonomic controls, medullary controls neurons, lateral horn, gray matter, that sort of stuff. Circulatory changes as a result of stressful stimulation can basically have tremendous effects upon the cortex, the deeper brain nuclei. Central autonomic nervous system also modulates the release of certain peptides and catecholamines that affect both blood volume and total peripheral vascular resistance. How does that affect blood volume? Gee golly, it doesn't make you bleed. How does it affect blood volume? Acoustic boy, what do you think?
Yeah.
Microphone man. Do you not have to put that all the way over here anymore?
No, well, I tested it out one day and it works very well from here as well.
Good. I feel like Walter Cronkite.
Yeah. Release a ACTH, perhaps?
To do what?
So then ACTH will stimulate the release of antidiuretic hormone, I believe. Some kind of glucocorticoid that I can't think of.
No, but you're close. It has to do with making urine.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All the things, the filtration rate, that sort of stuff. That's how it affects circulating volume. It doesn't cause you to bleed. It causes you to make urine, or to not make urine, as the case may be, thereby increasing or decreasing the amount of circulatory volume. The cerebral cortex also has effects on visual, olfactory, labyrinthine, and motor origin. I want to tell you, a week ago Monday, Sunday, and then Monday, I thought I was going to die. In fact, the first hour I was afraid I was going to die. The second hour I was afraid I was not going to die. Somehow, whatever this thing is that's going on in my snot locker right now, I'm rolling down, but a couple of the virions, I believe is the appropriate terminology, found their way into my labyrinth, and I wound up with viral labyrinthitis and probably neuritis as well. And I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning on Sunday with the most violent vertigo I have ever, it was like grabbed, I thought a tornado picked up the house. Woke up out of it. Strangely enough, it's amazing how the mind works. I was having a dream before I was awakened. Immediately before I was awakened, I was having a dream. And in this dream, I was putting, you know how polyvinyl chloride pipe fits together? There's a matter in there, it fits like plumbing stuff. And I was trying to fit these things together, but everything was moving, and I couldn't get it to go in. And I figured, I didn't know why things were moving, but I figured if I could figure out the rate and direction of vibration, I could put my hand movements in coordination with that, put the two ends of the pipe together. And I had a whiteboard behind me, and I was trying to create the equation to do that. And some guy who I had no idea who he was, but he was older than me, came, how can you be so stupid? You're trying to figure out a calculus problem using trigonometry. You can't do that. It's a function of x, f equal x, f equal x. And I thought, oh, why, of course. And anyway, that's why I woke up.
That was your dream?
I swear to God. Do you find that somehow unusual?
My dreams don't even compare. That's great.
Oh! Well, your dreams might result in a more pleasant ending than mine.
No, they don't school.
Oh, okay. Because my dream was ended by me rolling over in bed and trying to grab onto the bed because I was convinced that the room was spinning, and I immediately sat bolt upright in bed, went, it was very unpleasant, and that lasted for some period of time. If I lay perfectly still, it would stop. I think what happened was, as a result of the dream, I rolled over in bed, and the little rocks in your ears, wound up getting stimulated, and because of the virus, the labyrinth was sending faulty signals, and that's what caused me to have the vertigo. I mean, vertigo is very different than dizziness. I mean, vertigo it's that. And fortunately, through the wonders of old-fashioned medicine, through the wonders of modern medicine, but I don't think meclizine is modern medicine. But enough doses of meclizine, and it doesn't cure the vertigo, it just doesn't give a shit anymore. But fortunately, it lasted for about 2 days, and then I was dizzy for about another 5. But it was so bad, I had to cancel my clinical because I couldn't walk, I couldn't fly, certainly. I would get up out of bed and immediately fall into the wall. So I spent the entire day Monday in bed with my dog, who kept going, yeah, that's bad stuff to have. So at first what happened was when I realized the room was spinning, I thought the only ever time I've had vertigo in my life was when I was being anesthetized with ether to have my tonsils taken out when I was 4. The last thing I remember is the room spinning so much that I thought I was going to fly off the table that I was lying on, and then I was unconscious. So when I had this vertigo sensation, I said, my God, shortly I'm going to be, because people do learn from their experiences. I said to myself, shortly I'm going to be unconscious. The only reason people get unconscious is because you interrupted blood flow to your brain. Either I have some horrible cardiac event going on, I either have a huge tachycardia or a huge bradycardia, or I'm having a TIA. What can I do to stop myself from dying? Because there was nobody else there other than my dog, because I had been coughing and sneezing and whatever. My wife went to sleep in the guest room, so I'm figuring I'm going to die by myself with my dog here. So what could it possibly be? And as I'm running through a list of differential diagnoses, I thought, well, at least if it's a tachycardia, if I Valsalva maneuver, I may be able to slow it down, I'll be fine. And then I went, and it was still vertigo. I said, well, it's not that. So, and it's probably, I took my pulse, it was 120. I said, so it's not that. I said, oh my God, I'm having a TIA, I'm dying here. And then I laid down on the bed again and waited to die, and I didn't. So I thought, well, there you go. So I do what every grown man does in that circumstance. Martha! I'm sick! And she came in to me, being the kind, warm, and humane physician that she is, and just looked around and puked all over me. She said, yeah, you certainly are. On the second opinion. I know my second opinion. She said, you're ugly, too. Yeah. Okay. Well, why do we care about this? We care about this because there is a primary effect as a result of the projections from the baroreceptors that reach the tractus solitarius, and with these connections through the dorsal horn and the nuclei of the vagus, it makes a tremendous amount of effect on our cardiovascular system, basically based upon our heart rate. Now, if we were to look at the baroreceptors, which of course we can find the baroreceptors.
The baroreceptors
Not much on the arch of the aorta. Technically, yes, but they don't matter. Carotid what? There's only 2 goddamn choices, okay? You both choose the wrong one. You want to know the easy way to remember, so you will never forget ABC, aortic body chemo. And it's the same thing in the carotids. It's the carotid body. The carotid sinus, you didn't say body, did you?
I said body.
Yeah, there are those chemoreceptors. The carotid sinus is where the baroreceptors are. So you will never forget. Back in the olden days, and can still be done, one of the ways that you would treat a paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia, usually a PAT, carotid sinus massage. If you ever choose to do that, please check for bruits, right, beforehand. If they have no carotid circulation over here because they're 100% obstructed, and you do carotid massage over here, you're going to wind up in the same position I was Sunday morning at 5 o'clock. Except they don't have a real TIA. Yes, sir.
So, baroreceptors in the aortic body and, no.
Chemo. Well, chemoreceptors are in the aortic arch. The aortic body doesn't have one, really, but to make the ABC, you know?
Yeah.
That's where the
And carotid sinus has baroreceptors.
Yeah, the sinus has baroreceptors. The body, there is a carotid body.
Yeah.
And the carotid body is chemoreceptors. Primarily things for pH and
So what's in the aortic body?
chemoreceptors. Yeah, there are also chemoreceptors there too. But they're, to tell you the truth, they don't matter very much. The carotid stuff overtakes them tremendously. So what you would do in the golden old days for this, you do carotid sinus massage. You could also press on the globe, right? You could also stick your finger in their anus. Or was it spinal anesthesia? Doesn't matter. Okay. Why? Why would you press on somebody's neck? Oh my God. Speak. Somebody, raise your hand and talk. Vagus nerve, sure, because there are baroreceptors in the carotid body. You press on the carotid body and you are fooling the receptor if you're thinking the blood pressure has gone up. So, vagus, slow down the heart, the blood pressure is too much. In fact, one of the first before there was adenosine, one of the first ways that you could pharmacologically terminate a supraventricular tachycardia was to infuse aramine, metareminol, or neosynephrine, phenylephrine, and artificially raise their blood pressure to points where you probably wouldn't want it to be ordinarily, and very often you get about one screen and flat line, and then they pick back up again. Sometimes. Most of the time, but not all the time. Occasionally you have to just one little wrap. You gotta get them started again. So the carotids become crucially important in these circumstances. The central autonomic structures cooperate in certain survival mechanisms, the fight or flight, left over from the caveman days when the woolly mammoth or the saber-toothed tiger would be chasing you. Obviously, what you would have is an outpouring of catecholamines, which would do things like divert the circulation from your gut. You don't need to digest your last meal at the moment. What you need to do is send circulation to your lungs, to your brain, and to your skeletal muscles so that you can run away, or you can fight the saber-toothed tiger if you wish. One of the reasons that we have so many stress-related illnesses in the modern Western world these days is that the stress in us produces the same physiological response as being chased by the saber-toothed tiger. Okay, so you have this outpouring of catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, that sort of stuff to prepare you to fight or flight, and you wind up doing neither. You wind up squeezing stress balls and doing whatever else it is, but there is no mechanism to utilize all these catecholamines that you put out. So you wind up developing heart disease, you wind up developing all sorts of ischemic problems because of the vasoconstriction that occurs chronically. You wind up feeling poorly, you wind up getting metabolic diseases because in addition to this, one of those catecholamines, when they're expressed, they have a tremendous amount of influence upon glucose utilization and glucose excretion from the pancreas, not to mention gluconeogenesis, right, which is gluconeogenesis. That'll leave a mark. Gluconeogenesis. That's great, by the way, pain diversion, because my throat really hurts right now. I have a terrible sore throat, and for about 2 seconds after this, my throat stopped hurting. So it's called diversional pain therapy.
The formation of glucose within the liver.
From what?
For usage.
From what? Where's glucose come from?
Glycogen.
Glycogen, sure. As opposed to glycogenolysis, where the glucose is converted into glycogen and stored in your liver. Right. Your liver is a wonderful thing. However, it must be abused on a daily basis. So when you look at the neurotransmitters, which we need to look at. And in the somatic nervous system, neurotransmitter is acetylcholine, ACTH. In the autonomic nervous system, the stuff that has, when you look at the adrenergic side, which is actually the most important side for us because the alpha and beta receptors are adrenergic receptors discovered by Alquist, I think, back 100 million years ago. In the CNS, initially, the presynaptic ganglia have got acetylcholine as the neurotransmitter, but when the rubber meets the road, it's norepinephrine. Okay, now that's for those types of, when you get to muscle cell, for instance, which is not autonomic, but skeletal or peripheral nervous system, we're back to ACTH again. Now, the cholinergic receptors are you don't have many sympathetic cholinergic, but most of your parasympathetic is cholinergic, and again, you have ACTH. That's why when you look at drugs, for instance, to reverse, have you had your reversal? No, okay. Well, one of the drugs that you can use to reverse non-depolarized neuromuscular blockade is a drug called neostigmine. And the way neostigmine works, it is a cholinesterase inhibitor. And by having a smaller amount of cholinesterase, you wind up with an overload of acetylcholine, which is why when you talk about the parasympathetic receptors, why one of the major adverse effects of giving a drug like neostigmine is profound bradycardia, because it is vagomimetic or parasympathomimetic via the vagus. When you think of the balance of the nervous system, and they're going to, when I talk about the acute pathophysiology of pain in another lecture, we're going to talk about the fact that there's, when you have competing sources, and the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system is a perfect example. When you have competing sources, the issue is not the absolute amount of neurotransmitter that you have or tonicity of that system, whether it's a parasympathetic tone or sympathetic tone. The issue is the relationship between those two things. For instance, everything's level, everybody's homeokinetic, yada yada. Sympathetic, right hand, parasympathetic, left hand. Everything's nice and normal. I want somebody's heart rate to go up, okay? Now, there's a couple of ways I can do that. I can either give them a sympathomimetic. This is now higher than this, and their heart rate will go up, right? The other thing I can do with changing sympathomimesis in no way, give them a parasympatholytic. This is higher than that. Have I done anything sympathetically? No. Instead, I blocked their parasympathetic, so they have a sympathetic overload. You'll find the same thing is true with excitatory neurons and inhibitory neurons in the dorsal horn when we talk about pain transmission. So you have two ways of affecting these things. If you want the heart rate to go up or want the heart rate to go down, you can either use sympathomimesis or parasympatholysis, or you can use parasympathomimesis and sympatholysis, right? We have drugs to do all of those things, do we not? Let's see.
Yes, sir.
I gave you four choices.
Yes.
Parasympathomimesis, parasympatholysis, sympathomimesis, sympatholysis. Give me an example of one of those four drugs and tell me what it is.
Okay, so I'm going to work off of what you were saying about neostigmine.
Okay.
And so with neostigmine, because of the profound bradycardia, we're going to also give glycopyrrolate.
You did that. I didn't ask.
Oh.
Just answer the question that's asked.
So glycopyrrolate, I'll say that.
Well, that's exactly the opposite of what you just said. So tell me which one you want.
So that I want to give glycopyrrolate to increase,
Okay, you want to give glycopyrrolate to do what?
increase the heart rate.
Yeah, okay. So by what mechanism does it do that?
I'm going to say it's the sympathomimetic. No, it's the other one.
Okay. What is the other one?
The parasympatholytic.
Yes, right, okay. You are now down to three choices. Could be one of the three and a drug that does it.
What was Mom's choice? I don't do the same one.
Well, if you don't remember, then go ahead. I'll stop you.
Can I say atropine?
You can say whatever you want. So what is atropine going to do?
Sympathomimetics. No.
Eh.
Okay.
So, say a drug like epinephrine.
Epinephrine?
It's a sympathomimetic.
Bingo, done, finished, stop, you're perfect. Next.
I would say norepinephrine.
Okay,
Sympathomimetic.
okay.
I was gonna say dopamine, but doesn't work.
Dopaminergic receptors.
Yeah, it's a totally separate receptor.
Yes, that's later in the lecture.
So we talked about glycopyrrolate, we talked about neostigmine, we talked about epi, we talked about norepi. You could do phenylephrine, and that works on the alpha receptor, so that's sympathomimetic.
Okay, fine. Neostigmine, what's it do?
Neostigmine is an adrenergic.
Is it sympathetic or parasympathetic?
It's
Is it sympathetic or parasympathetic? Yes, thank you. Okay. For everything, I want you to, everything is related. Everything is related. So how do this work? This works because you have synthesizing enzymes, and we're going to talk about the synthesizing enzymes in a moment. The synthesizing enzymes create the neurotransmitter precursors. The neurotransmitter precursors are then turned into the neurotransmitter itself as a result of perhaps degrading enzymes, or as a result of the fact that when they get back in, they get degraded, then they get sent back to the synthesizing enzymes to be remade. The impulse comes along. This is a nerve. This is a synapse. This is the other end of the other nerve, the axon and the dendrite. Oh, I'm going to release my neurotransmitter. Actually, here. I'm going to release my neurotransmitter now. And the neurotransmitter goes over to the receptor and occupies the receptor, right? And when it occupies the receptor, it is an agonist, right? So it causes that receptor to fire. You get the change in the conformation of the gene, right? All right? Yeah. Are you shouting because you're agreeing with me, or because you have no idea what the hell I'm saying?
No, I was still thinking about the previous question and what I should have answered.
That's dead. That's history. That's fine.
Yeah.
No, don't worry about it. If you worry about your wrong answers, you will never get anywhere. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Especially.
Yeah.
So once you have agonism, then the impulse is transmitted, right? Impulse moving along a wire. It's not one wire. It's lots of wires that are connected to junction boxes through these things. These things can be viewed as the wire twister caps, okay? That are on, if you've ever seen the inside of a junction box, if you pull the plastic cover off the wall there, you're going to see a place where the wires are either attached with screws to the outlet, or they're connected as a jump with a wire turn. The wire nut, we call them wire nuts. The wire nuts do exactly the same thing as the neurotransmitter. Okay, it permits that impulse to go from one wire to the other. And in this case, when we're talking about a sympathetic nervous system, what is this one? What are these neurotransmitters? Norepinephrine. Okay. So if you have norepinephrine depletion, when do people get norepinephrine depletion? There are two ways. One is
when you have too many receptors that take up.
Adrenal insufficiency.
That's upregulation. That's a whole other thing. Shock. Who said shock?
Sepsis.
Shock. Sure. Catecholamine depletion. Exhaustion of the gas. GAS, General Adaptation Syndrome. Hans Selye, University of Montreal, 1953. Right? Le stressor was the article. Canadian Journal of Medicine talked about the stress response, general adaptation syndrome, alarm, response, exhaustion. Does anybody understand what I'm saying? Do you remember this? Didn't you have this? Somebody please nod. You've heard of the general adaptation syndrome, right?
I've heard of
Yes
that.
or no?
Yes.
Okay, fine, thank you. You're gonna say, this is not the first time you heard this, right? Well, the general adaptation syndrome is alarm, response, big catecholamine, and then it goes away and you get exhausted. So, that's a perfect example of why in certain patients, when you say, well, ketamine causes have you had ketamine in your pharm class yet? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes.
We have yes, we have no.
Yes.
What's the right?
Yes, I know.
Are you all in the same class?
Yes.
Yes, you had ketamine. Where?
Online lecture.
It was 12.
Fine, okay, so you had ketamine. One of the things he probably told you that ketamine causes the heart rate and blood pressure to go up, right? He did say that. Did he tell you when that does not happen? Does he tell you why it happens?
It eliminates
It what? Not suppression. No! Stimulation! Well, your heart it causes you to secrete from the nerve endings and the adrenals, catecholamines, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, right? So, when does that not happen, and when can ketamine actually cause left ventricular depression?
When your stores are depleted.
In patients who are catecholamine depleted.
Right.
Because they don't have any. Because they're in shock, or because, I said there were two reasons. What's the other? No, beta blockers work here to block the result. You're thinking the right way, but it's not, you're one step too late. This happens before then.
Adrenal insufficiency.
That's one, I hadn't thought about that, that's one possibility, adrenal insufficiency. There are drugs that are used to treat hypertension chronically that do what to levels of catecholamines?
Alpha-2 agonist.
Decrease the levels of circulating catecholamines and catecholamines at nerve endings. You don't have as much norepinephrine, right?
Right.
So the ketamine can't release shit that ain't there. So people who've been on drugs like Reserpine or any of those types of old-time drugs, which you still see people on. I see people on Reserpine all the time still, okay? Anything that will deplete endogenous stores of catecholamines pharmacologically is going to make somebody catecholamine depleted. So when you give them the ketamine, the major effect of which on cardiovascular function is to increase the CV function by releasing endogenous stores of catecholamines. If they don't have any endogenous stores to release, ketamine in and of itself, without the effect of the catecholamines, has a direct myocardial depressant effect. So that's the only time you will see the direct myocardial depressant effect. So the point is, if you got somebody who came in who was at the Saturday Night Knife and Gun Club meeting, okay, and comes in and they're in shock and catecholamine depleted, because you're very scared about their low blood pressure, don't say, oh, this is great, I'll give this guy ketamine and he'll be better. Not so much. Not so much. Now, if they're acutely hypovolemic and that, but if they're in shock and have been in shock, automobile accident, a friend of mine, unfortunately, when I was making a site visit at Memorial the other day, yesterday, a friend calls me, you still here? Yeah, I didn't know anything. I'm down in Bay 11 with Andy Stetko, who's an old friend of a Navy guy together. 95, somebody cut him off, spun out, hit the guardrail, hit a tree, bump, C2 fracture. You know. Fortunately for Andy, being a Navy special operator for about 20 years out in the desert wearing funny hats, people who are much better at it have tried to kill him for a long time and didn't succeed, so he has a non-displaced transverse fracture at C2, which does not require operation, and he has no neurological deficits at all. Luckiest son of a bitch in the world. His car was absolutely destroyed. Took him 45 minutes to cut him out of the car. So if he came in healthy, but if he was not healthy, okay, those are the kinds of because that's one of the first things that, you know, if you're in the initial, if you're in the trauma bay, for instance, when this guy comes in, and there are trauma bays, you take places like Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, and that they'll do major surgery they drag him into the OR right there. They have an OR right in the trauma center on the first floor where they come in, And they frequently have anesthesia hanging out there all the time or in close proximity. So if you're the first one that gets it, this doesn't apply all that much when you've been in the working their way through you to the operating room and have gotten all sorts of drugs and medicines. But if you're the first one to get them, one of the questions you always want to ask is, like an automobile accident, how long did it take to extricate him from the vehicle? Because if it took him an hour to get the guy out of the car and he's hypotensive, he's probably in real shock as opposed to acute hypovolemic blood loss. Because the longer that goes on, the worse they do. And then all the catecholamines are gone. So, not a good kind of candidate. You know what I mean? So, we'll talk more about this in a moment. So what do you have to know? What you have to know to understand what's going on at the cellular level is you have to know the functional class of the neurotransmitters. You should have some understanding of their structure. You have to know that because that's how you know how they get metabolized, whether or not they are demethylated, for instance, or there's a couple of deaminization can occur in these things. So one of the things you have to understand is what they actually look like. So I'm not saying that you have to draw this, but you have to have a general understanding of the type of chemical compound that it is, understanding the IUPAC. International University of Practical Chemistry, some IUPAC. You have to understand the IUPAC structures of these things. You have to understand where they come from and the functional class of what they are. These things don't occur by themselves. They are actually created and made. If you look at catecholamine synthesis, what we're talking about is you start off with tyrosine, which is, what is tyrosine?
It's an amino acid. The rate limiting step.
Any kind of amino acid?
I don't know.
What's the word?
Rate limiting?
Usually follows, it precedes amino acid.
Purine or pyrimidine?
Is it important? It's not only important, it's essential.
Yeah.
It's an essential.
Oh, it cannot be produced. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The movie a million years ago, Gattaca, G-A-T-T-A-C,
Yeah.
it's all the essential amino acids. Yeah. You should probably know that. So in any event, the tyrosine is acted upon by tyrosine hydrolase, which then converts the tyrosine to dopa. The dopa is then acted on by aromatic L-amino acid decarboxylase, and that turns the dopa into dopamine. Dopamine is then acted upon by dopamine beta hydroxylase, which converts it into norepinephrine. Norepinephrine can then either be left by itself or it can be converted through the action of the enzyme of phenylethylamine N-methyltransferase, don't you love that, to epinephrine. So the inhibitors of catecholamine synthesis can occur in many ways, one of which is to, theoretically, you could decrease tyrosine uptake, right? There is no way to do that. Too bad, so sad. You can't interrupt it there, okay? However, tyrosine hydroxylase blocks the enzyme that would then convert the tyrosine into dopamine. If, in fact, you use alpha-methyl-dopa in high concentrations, you can block the enzyme that converts that into dopamine by using drugs like reserpine, one of the drugs that we talked about earlier. It's a mechanism that depends on the levels of free magnesium and adenosine triphosphate. You can block the dopamine from turning into norepinephrine. Gesundheit. Difference. Everything works. We are coming to realize now that everything works in the body in terms of receptors. Everything is a lock and key. We talked a little bit about this when I did my pharmacokinetic dynamics lecture, right? Everything fits in to something else, and that's what activates it. It's like a lock and key mechanism. It's also the way of a successful marriage. If I marry somebody like me, probably within 3 years, I'd have killed her, or we'd have been divorced, or she'd have killed me, or something like that. My wife is exactly the opposite of me in just about every personality trait. It's just like a lock and key. My strengths are her weaknesses are my strengths, okay? If I tried to marry somebody like me, or she tried to marry somebody like her, she'd have never gotten out of the shitty little horse kicking town where she grew up. If I married somebody like me, I'd have probably been in jail, you know, by this time. So when I was like going, you know, she was like, now I know you find this difficult to believe. I tend to get carried away.
No.
Yeah, it's true. I really do. Now, she did, but a perfect example of how Glasser's reality therapy works is I decided that I wanted to learn how to fly. I decided that after somebody for my birthday present gave me a Piper Blue Sky certificate where the instructor takes you up to go 3 times around the patch. Well, that was one of those things. There were certain things in my life that I discovered just boop, bite me. And once I'd been bit, that's it. So I was bit, and I decided I'm going to be a pilot. I didn't particularly think I wanted to learn how to fly in a rented airplane because who the hell knew who flew it before and how they landed it? And, you know, it's always better to be. I learned this as a student pilot, and it's true now. When people bitch and moan and complain, I was on a flight that was canceled. They had some mechanical problem with it, and the guy in front of me is bitching to the counter agent. I gotta be the I can run this flight, yada yada. You know, it's always better to be on the ground, wishing you were in the air, than to be in the air, wishing you were on the ground. You know, if the airplane's broken, that's fine. Take all the time you need to fix it. That's quite all right. So I thought, I don't want to fly an airplane that somebody else has flown. And you learn in a 2-seat. I was at Piper Place. You learn what that it was a Piper Tomahawk that they learned in, or a Warrior 150 or some little wind-up plane. Well, I wasn't going to do that. Eventually, if I was going to get an airplane, I was going to get an airplane to put people in and use for work and yada, yada, yada. So as a zero-time pilot, I had never been in an airplane before. I went out and I bought a PA-32, which is a 7-place, high-performance, retractable gear, turbocharged monster airplane, and decided to learn it. Now, my wife let me do that because she thought it was a logical thing to do. Okay, fine. However, an airport came up for sale in Dallas County, Florida, and I thought it was a great idea. I could run the FBO, the fixed base operator, so all my overhauls on the airplane will be free, and we can make money doing flight instruction and all that stuff. She said, absolutely not. You are not buying the goddamn airport. I will divorce you. In retrospect, it would not have been a very good deal. It was right before the stock market crashed in the early 90s. That would not have been good to own an airport, a private general aviation airport. So it's a perfect example of lock and key. I get a little crazy, and she goes, go back a little bit. But that's how everything, in fact, they're no longer looking at physiology to design new drugs. They're looking at electromicrography at receptor sites. What do they look like? How can we design a molecule that fits specifically into this receptor? They're looking at shapes. How do I make a shape that fits into this? Because in normal, let's say this is the ligand. Okay, by definition, a ligand is anything that carries a chemical messenger, right? It can be a hormone. There's some methodology that transmits information in the endocrine system, and that can be done in 3 ways, right? And those 3 ways are, could be 1.
3 ways for
Communication via ligands.
neurotransmitters.
Huh?
Neurotransmitters.
No, that's what does it. What are the methods of communication? Yeah.
The cell-to-cell signaling.
Huh?
Cell-to-cell signaling.
What's that called? That can be done in 3 ways.
Endogenous.
Very close.
Paracrine?
Paracrine? Endocrine? Autocrine. Right? So if this, of course, is the cell membrane. Why is that important in autocrine communication?
Communicate with yourself.
How does a cell, by definition, what is autocrine communication?
Talking to myself.
Pretty much, yeah. It's sort of the physiological equivalent of never mind. Stimulating yourself. Okay. Well, if it's already there, if the ligand is already in the cell, why doesn't it just work from there? because there's no receptors inside the cell. The receptors are outside the cell on the cell membrane. So in order to have autocrine communication, the cell has to express the ligand out of itself and then have that ligand fit into the receptor. Now, if that thing fits and it goes in there the way it's supposed to, and all the little plugs line up like the Ethernet cable on your machine or the thumb drive, if all those positive things line up with all the other positive things and you have a connection, this is an agonist to this, because it not only fits, but it depolarizes this. And as a result of depolarizing the receptor, you have the conformational change in the cell membrane. The G proteins change. This becomes the first messenger. The what comes out of here and moves into the cell. This is the first messenger. The second messenger effect, right? First messenger only goes as far as here. Agonizes, changes in the conformation of the G protein in the cell wall. Second messenger stuff goes into the cell, and as a result of that, effects the change. Now, this is a diagram of a M2 muscarinic receptor. You should understand that. Nobody cares about that. This is a norepinephrine receptor, which basically shows you some of the potential areas where the effect of the norepinephrine can be blocked. For instance, tricyclic antidepressants wind up increasing this is why, for instance, you might not want to give tricyclic antidepressants, decrease the metabolism, okay, of norepinephrine, thereby increasing the level of norepinephrine at nerve endings, okay, as a result of which tends to have people be a little more, because you got neurotransmitters in your head with norepinephrine, tends to be a little more up, okay, and antidepressant, more neurotransmitters for stimulation, woof, woof. The problem is, if you were to give an indirect acting vasopressor to these people, okay, which we're going to talk about in a moment, if you give an indirect acting vasopressor to these people, one of the things that's going to happen is they are going to have a much more, it would be like somebody with pheochromocytoma. Okay, they've got all this norepinephrine out there, and you give them something that's going to release the norepinephrine from the nerve endings, they're going to have a tremendously large increase in circulating amounts of norepinephrine, right? So people on tricyclic antidepressants, MAO inhibitors, monoamine oxidase inhibitors, that sort of stuff, these are not the people you want to use indirect acting vasopressors on, because they have huge stores of endogenous catecholamines. So you don't want to do that. When you look at catecholamine receptors, you need to understand the type, alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2, where they are. The dopaminergic receptors 1 or 2. You need to know what the actions are of these drugs. You need to know what the receptor response to these drugs is. And you should also know, the mechanism of breakdown of these drugs, mechanism of metabolism. Now, this is the short, down, and dirty of stuff that we did before. So this would be good stuff to know. You need to know what your alpha 1s and alpha 2s do and beta 1s and beta 2s do, knowing that they do different things in different, the result of what they do is going to be different things in different places, right? For instance, beta 1 is in the heart, right? Beta 2 is in the bronchi, right? Beta 2 can dilate the bronchi, but guess what? It's also in blood vessels. Now, there's more alphas than there are betas, but if the alpha is blocked for some reason, and all you have left is beta, and you give beta stimulation to somebody who's alpha blocked because they have low blood pressure, what things that happen to their blood pressure is going to become worse because you're going to dilate them out because the alpha's been blocked, right? So if you say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to give this beta agonist and their blood pressure is going to go up. Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. So know those sorts of things. This is the other, we call it chicken feet, the plus size. This sort of gives you a ranking of these sorts of things. You should have a pretty good idea of what that stuff shows. Sympathomimetics can be either endogenous catecholamines, okay, coming out of your own adrenals. They can be synthetic catecholamines. We can make catecholamines. We can create epinephrine and norepinephrine. We don't have to grow them or suck them out of other people or that, or take them from pigs like we do with insulin. Okay, we can now just create this sort of stuff in a laboratory. Now, synthetic catecholamines are either direct-acting synthetic-acting non-cholamines, are either direct-acting or indirect-acting. Indirect-acting example, for instance, would be ephedrine. Ephedrine sulfate releases whatever norepinephrine and epinephrine stuff you've got hanging out in the periphery. So again, if you've got somebody who's in shock, who is epinephrine depleted, norepinephrine depleted, catecholamine depleted, using ephedrine is probably not the best idea. However, some other synthetic non-catecholamines, drugs like norepinephrine, scratch that, phenylephrine, neosynephrine, will in fact have direct effect on these receptors and tighten up without relying on there being endogenous stores of catecholamines. It will directly affect the receptors. There are certain physiological responses similar to produced by the sympathetic nervous system, things like vasoconstriction, vasodilation of skeletal muscles, bronchodilation, cardiac stimulation, liberation of free fatty acids, thank you very much, so that they can be broken down and used for energy, hepatic glycogenolysis, modulation of insulin, renin, pituitary stuff, and general central nervous system situation. You've got to be more aware. Clinical use is positive inotropic effect, making the heart beat harder, okay? And a lot of times positive chronotropic effect, making the heart beat faster. Now, keep in mind, vasopressors do nothing but give you some help until you get the problem solved. If somebody's bled out, you give them all the vasopressors you want, but if you don't fill them up again, it's not going to do any good. All you're going to do is kill them from the outside in. That's why we used to call levofed, lethofed, or levodead. Because if you don't correct what the problem is, all you do is keep increasing vasoconstriction, and eventually their fingers and toes rot. They sort of rot from the outside in. They kind of die in pieces. So if your problem is a flow problem, you've got to solve the flow problem. Now, the flow problem could be not enough stuff to flow, they're hypovolemic, or their heart is not good, okay? So you may want to fill them up, or you may want to tighten them up for a while so you can get them filled up, or you may want to give them a positive cardiac inotrope. You may need to make the heart beat faster in some way. So you can't just, unless you know the answer to what the problem is, you can't just say the blood pressure's low, I'm going to give a vasopressor, okay? The blood pressure's low, I'm going to give a vasopressor. The blood pressure's 80. Well, suppose I put a swan in and I say, guess what? The systemic vascular resistance is 2,500 dynes per centimeter square. You think giving this guy a vasopressor is going to do you any good? No, that's not the problem. The problem is not he isn't squoze tight enough. In this guy, now you've got to have a pair like a pawnbroker sign, because what you want to do is vasodilate him. You want to vasodilate him, fill him up, and whip his heart. Now, you can whip the heart with beta-1 stimulation, or you can whip the heart by doing things like inhibiting the enzymes, okay, that would normally break down the adenosine triphosphate, diphosphate, and induce the energy production, right?
Right.
I said right, so. Does this make any sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, when we talk about catecholamines, what makes a catecholamine a catecholamine? They are all these things, the catecholamines and non-catecholamines that are sympathomimetic. They're all derived from beta-phenylethylalanine. What makes a catecholamine is the hydroxyl group is on carbons number 3 and 4. This is the basic structure from which the catecholamine is made. Receptor selectivity depends upon the structure, whether it's alpha or beta, whether it's beta 1 or beta 2. Epinephrine has optimal effects on both alpha and beta. It is a mixed agonist. However, any change in the structure of that epinephrine reduces the effect. For instance, racemic epinephrine is probably a lot better for beta 2 stuff, for instance, than it is beta 1. Remember we talked about change in configuration, racemic, half levo, half dextro, right? Excuse me. If, for instance, you were to take the catecholamine and have the hydroxyl group not on carbons 3 and 4, but on 3 and 5, that makes it beta 2 selective. That's why we can have beta agonists that, for instance, are beta 1 selective or both, things like salmeterol and those sorts of things, as opposed to drugs that are basically cardiac selective, and we can have beta antagonists that do basically the same type of a thing. For instance, if you want to use propranolol on somebody, that is a non-selective beta antagonist that antagonizes both beta 1 and beta 2, and if you give a big whopping dose of propranolol to somebody because their heart's too fast and their blood pressure's too high, and they also happen to be asthmatic or have particularly unfortunate reactive airway disease, you're going to be trying to ventilate a brick. Why? Because when you block the betas, you block the betas. There's betas here and there's betas here, and if you block the betas here, the pipe that used to be this big is now this big, and it's full of boogers and snot and crap, and it's going to be very difficult to try and get air into that mess. So this is what epinephrine looks like. Carbon 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, right? Like it's supposed to be. Isomers in the dextro and rotatory forms of norepinephrine are half as active as the levorotatory forms. Levorotatory isoproterenol is 1,000 times more effective than the dextro isomer, just to provide more import to what I said the other day. If you have CNS stimulation, it's prominent, usually for us, with synthetic non-catecholamines. That's one of the reasons why, if you take a drug like methamphetamine, for instance, it has much more central nervous system stimulation than ephedrine does. Why do you think that is? Why do you? Robert, why do you think that is?
Lipid solubility.
Bingo! Because crosses the magic BBB, the blood-brain barrier, right? Ephedrine doesn't do that. Well, it actually does a smidge, but nowhere near as much. So as a result of that, ephedrine is much less potent as a central nervous system stimulant, but much more potent when it comes to being a cardiac stimulant or bronchodilator. Catecholamines generally have limited lipid solubility. If you look at mechanism of action, you can either have direct or indirect stimulation of alpha, beta, or dopaminergic receptors, bind to the cell surface, recognizes the ligand. If it binds to the cell surface, creates the conformational change in the cell wall, releases the G proteins. The G proteins diffuse, and they find the effector protein. Most likely, it will be adenylate cyclase. Phospholipase C comes into effect, and you wind up having an increase in cyclic AMP. The order of messengers, Sympathomimetics, that stimulates the adenylate cyclase that converts adenosine triphosphate to cyclic AMP. Things like ephedrine will be the first messenger, cyclic AMP inside the cell will be second messenger. Phosphodiesterase controls the intracellular level of CMP. So I talked about doing something that's going to increase the strength of cardiac contraction without necessarily doing something that's going to increase. If I want to increase inotropism but not chronotropism, how am I going to do that? I'm going to do that by giving something like a phosphodiesterase inhibitor, right? By inhibiting phosphodiesterase, I wind up having more of the stuff that is required to be available that's going to have me produce larger levels of cyclic AMP within the cell, which means there's more energy, okay, to be involved in cardiac contraction. The density of receptors in the tissue controls the effect. This is where upregulation and downregulation comes in, either due to things like transections of the spinal cord, chronic exogenous drug therapy, those sorts of things. There is an inverse relationship between the availability of the drug and the number of receptors. If you have an increased drug, you have decreased receptors. If you keep giving somebody drug, they have X number of receptors for that drug. Well, the more of that drug you give, the less of those receptors they need because there's so much drug floating around. So those receptors eventually start to dry up and blow away. And that's downregulation. Upregulation is when you have much fewer amount of the drug, and the body wants the drug, so it keeps making more receptors to pick up a transection of the spinal cord, right? Transection of the spinal cord below the level of injury is going to cause a tremendous increase in the number of receptor sites available for acetylcholine, because there's not much acetylcholine, because there's no neurotransmission going down there to release it, to move muscle. So they're going to have tremendous amounts of receptors, as a result of which you come along and give somebody acetylcholine, succinylcholine, that's going to create a huge depolarization of all these muscles, and all the stuff they are going to have unbelievable amounts of serum potassium there that's been sitting in the cell because nothing's come out because there hasn't been any stimulation because of upregulation, right?
Yes.
Because when you give somebody succinylcholine, it comes along and does the thing that acetylcholine would have done. It is a real agonist. It's not a blocker. It's an agonist. It does the same thing that acetylcholine does. It'll depolarize the cell. That cell that has not been depolarized in a gazillion years, and as a result of which, we're normally when the cell depolarizes, where does the potassium go? Intracellular to extracellular. Well, if it doesn't depolarize, all this calcium sitting around in there going, geez, I wish I could get out. Well, the succinylcholine comes on, bang, boom, depolarized. I'm free. Bingo, all the potassium goes out, and they get a spike, they get a serum potassium of like 8, and then they fibrillate and die. You'll get T waves like you never saw in your life. It is so exciting. Indirect acting vasopressors, like I said, they are synthetic non-catecholamines. They release endogenous stores of epinephrine and norepinephrine from the postsynaptic nerve endings. Why postsynaptic? Because presynaptic is acetylcholine. Mostly alpha and beta effects. Direct acting drugs are drugs that actually activate the adrenergic receptors. They are catecholamines. They are drugs like epinephrine and norepinephrine. Drugs like phenylephrine and methoxamine are less potent than catecholamines, but they do the same thing. They are direct acting. They are not non-direct acting. Denervation or depletion does not prevent action because somebody has got their spinal cord transected. It doesn't mean that they no longer have receptors for these things. In fact, they have more receptors because they've been upregulated. Gimme, there ain't enough around. So you give them something that's going to hit that receptor, and surprise, surprise, there's now a lot more receptors than there used to be, so you get a lot more physiologic response. Metabolism, catecholamines, all of them, as I said, are dihydroxyls at the 3 and 4 carbon. They are inactivated by MAO, methylamine oxidase, and COMT, co-oxytyl methyltransferase. They work by different ways. MAO metabolizes catecholamines by oxidative deamination, takes the amide group off the end, and COMT does it by methylating the OH group. It takes the methyl and adds it on to one of the OH groups, and that basically winds up deactivating the drug. This is the classic one. It is, in fact, epinephrine is naturally occurring. It's one of the more powerful ones, at least in terms of beta. You can actually give this stuff by all sorts of ways. You can give it IM, you can give it subcutaneously, you can give it IV, certainly. They used to use it subcutaneously for people with asthma and acute reactive airway disease. There's little CNS effect, and not a tremendous amount of airway effects, but some. It does have some metabolic effects in terms of increasing the efficiency of glucose utilization. Norepinephrine is naturally occurring at the postganglionic nerve endings. It's a pretty potent agonist, specifically for alpha. Dopamine, one receptor, postsynaptic. The whole concept of a real dose of dopamine, I think, is crap. In order to give enough dopamine to work, you're obviously going to have some type of chronotropic effect with that, as well as an inotropic effect with this particular drug. Isopreternol, tremendously powerful beta antagonist. It'll get your heart going pretty quickly. It has no alpha effects at all. It's metabolized by CoAMP. Dobutamine is a synthetic. Catecholamine is a selective 1 beta receptor and is a pretty directly metabolized. Ephedrine Indirect acting vasopressor releases the stuff at the nerve ending, the synthetic non-catecholamine, can even be administered PO. There's a lot of stuff that's ephedrine in it, or pseudoephedrine, Sudafed, pseudoephedrine hydrochloride. Yeah, that's what it is. Has very little metabolic effects. Phenylephrine is a synthetic non-catecholamine, primarily alpha-1, mimics the effects of norepinephrine, but it is much less profound, but of longer duration. Methoxamine, direct-acting vasopressor, synthetic non-catecholamine, alpha only, devoid of any and all beta effects, and there you go. Everything you ever wanted to know.